Yeah, uh, yeah, uh, yeah.
All right, question one. A social worker employed in an outpatient setting is meeting with a 32-year-old African American male for case management services. The social worker intends to implement a therapeutic approach that focuses on the client's past experiences to understand and affect change upon their current emotions and behaviors. Which theory would be most effective? All right, y'all. So this is a straight recall question. What is critical here is this therapeutic approach that has the primary focus on the client's past experience to understand and reflect change upon their current emotions and behaviors. Although knowing the setting that the social worker's in, outpatient setting, meeting with a 32-year-old African American male is good. However, that's not our primary reason. So when we look at this and we see questions that have A, B, C, D, this is a straight recall question. This is what you want on the exam to get 100% correct. So, again, my primary focus here is the client's past experiences to understand and effect change upon their current emotions and behaviors. So, when I read that, is that going to be family systems theory? No, it's not. So I am going to rule out A. This is not our correct answer. The reason why is because family system theory has a primary focus to view the family as a complex, interconnected system where the individuals with the roles and the rules, and then the consideration of communication patterns. That is not my focus here. So now let's look at B, strengths-based practice. Is that going to be the most appropriate therapeutic approach here? Nope, it's not. So we're going to rule out B. So with the strengths-based practice, this is where an individual wants to have a positive psychological approach in our psychotherapy where we really focus on the strengths and the resources that that client has because we want to improve their overall well-being and reduce any of those problematic symptoms. All right, so now let's look at C, psychodynamic theory. Would this be that appropriate approach? I think so. So let's hold on to psychodynamic theory. So with this therapeutic approach, it has that primary component where you really want to focus on the unconscious mind and its influences on behavior, thoughts, and feelings. And when I go back into my scenario, I know I want to pay attention to the client's past experiences so I can understand and determine what is that effect upon their current emotions and behaviors. So we're going to hold on to C because so far this seems like a pretty strong answer. But we got to look at all of them. So D, social learning theory. No. We are going to rule this one out. The reason we want to rule social learning theory out is because this is when the theorist Albert, he had the idea that individuals learn by observing others and they learn by those consequences rather than solely through direct experiences. So, for the purpose of this one, the correct answer is going to be C. A psychodynamic theory is going to have that primary focus on the client's past experiences to understand and determine how does this affect what's going on in my current emotions and my behaviors. All right, question two. Justin, a 30-year-old military veteran, has recently undergone a significant transition back to civilian life following his departure from the armed forces. He's encountering considerable difficulties in reestablishing connections with his husband and four children since his return to the familial environment. experiencing a profound sense of unpreparedness in addressing the emotional needs of his offspring. He articulates challenges in navigating their responsibilities inherent to family life. Ambivalent about how to effectively reintegrate into his previous roles beyond the military, what should the social worker do next? All right, y'all. So let's break this one down. So we have our client, Justin, who's 30 years old, military veteran. We know Justin has just transitioned back into the civilian life. So, as he's transitioning back into civilian life, he's experiencing difficulties. He's like, how do I connect with my husband and my 4 children, right? So, Justin then tells us, I'm unprepared in addressing the emotional needs of my children. I have challenges in navigating the responsibilities of what does it mean to be a family man? So, because he is so ambivalent about how to effectively reintegrate, which is critical, reintegrate into his previous roles by the military, what is going to be your best approach to help this individual? Next also means best, okay? It also means first. So, let's look at our answer choices. So, we have A, assure the client that his feelings are normal and he doesn't need therapy? Absolutely not. We're going to rule this one out. I'm not going to tell Justin, this 30-year-old, say, oh, that's completely normal. You don't need to see me. No, that is not providing any sort of benefit to him. So, B, provide psychoeducation on the effects of depression. Hmm. Okay, let's hold on to it. C, work with the client to determine his goal of therapy. Ooh, I really like this one. We going to hold on to C. D, engage in conversation regarding the veteran's military accomplishments. So I'm going to rule D out. The reason I'm going to rule this out is when we go back into the scenario, that is not the primary focus. We are not going to engage in conversation about his military accomplishments because I know Justin has told me he's unprepared in addressing the emotional needs. He is having challenges with how do I reintegrate as a family man from leaving the military. So, what is the best thing we can do? So, the answer to this one is going to be C. We need to work with him to determine what is your goal of therapy. The reason C is going to be our correct answer and not B, nowhere in the scenario does it say depression. So, we cannot put anything into the scenario that's not there. And then another reason we want to work with Justin to determine his goal of therapy is we see many different things. He's entering back into the civilian life. He's having difficulties with how do I be a husband? Another thing is how do I connect with my 4 children? How do I deal with navigating these responsibilities? This is an array of multiple goals that Justin has. So meet with him and identify what exactly are your goals that you want to work on within this therapeutic session. Question 3. A social worker is employed at Children's Protection Services and is meeting with a 7-year-old boy. The social worker received a referral in reference to parental neglect. When asked about his relationship with his father, he reports, my father's name is William Tyson. He's a good father. He provides for me. He's a great father. I enjoy spending time with him. As the assessment progresses, the child persistently reiterates the sentiment in various formulations. What inferences might the social worker draw from such a repetitive and empathetic response? All right, so we are a social worker employed at CPS. We are meeting with this 7-year-old boy. The reason we're meeting with him is because we received a referral due to parental neglect. So you're in your session with the 7-year-old and you're like, hey, tell me about your relationship with your father. So the 7-year-old's like, okay, My father's name is William Tyson. He's a good father. He provides for me. He's a great father. I enjoy spending time with him. Okay. So, as you continue on with your assessment with this 7 year old, he persistently reiterates the same statement that we highlighted in orange, right? So, as a CPS social worker, what can we draw from this repetitive response, right? Is it A, the social worker cannot interpret any abuse or neglect from the information? No, we are going to rule this one out. Absolutely not. The reason why we want to rule out A is because it tells us this 7 year old is saying this in a repetitive form. My father's name is William Tyson. He's a good father. He provides for me. He's a great father. I enjoy spending time with him. Rule it out. B, the child is afraid of his father but does not know if he can trust the social worker. Mm. Okay, let's hold on to it. Let's see. All right, C. The child was provided with a scripted response and there are underlying concerns of abuse or neglect. Oh, y'all, I really like this one. Let's hold on though. D. The child thinks very highly of his father and loves him. We could say that, but because we are going to be using our clinical skills, we're going to rule out D. This is not the best answer. So I know I got this 7 year old. I'm a CPS social worker. I got this referral for parental neglect. These are my context clues. This is what I really need to pay attention to. And then in this scenario, I know he's continuing to reiterate the same thing that's highlighted in orange. Therefore, C is going to be our best answer selection here. Unfortunately, this 7 year old may have been coached. Hey, when you go in there and you speak to that social worker, you say these things, right? He continues to say this in a repetitive form, just with different various formulations. So he may switch it up. Oh, he's an awesome father. We have so much fun together. But he knows not to draw out of skew with that conversation that's already been shared with that social worker. All right, question 4. A community based social worker is meeting with a 17-year-old adolescent for case management services. The social worker completed a case review and is aware the adolescent has a pattern of escalating temper outbursts over the past year, characterized by frequent argumentative behavior towards authority figures, a consistent refusal to comply with direct requests, heightened irritability, and a habitual tendency to employ blame as a mechanism to evade accountability. Approximately 4 months prior, he was apprehended during a singular incident of shoplifting. The most fitting diagnostic classification for this youth is. Whoo, all right, y'all. This is a lot that's going on in this one. So, we are a community based social worker. Our client is a 17-year-old adolescent. Now, what do we know about the 17-year-old? The information that's being presented to us is he has a pattern of escalating temper, frequent argumentative behavior. What's critical here is towards authority figures. This is so important. Also, this 17-year-old consistently refuses to comply with direct requests. He's irritated and he likes to have a habitual tendency to employ blame as a mechanism to evade accountability. Something else that's critical here with this 17-year-old, he was apprehended. That means he was arrested, y'all. He was arrested due to an incident of shoplifting. So I got this 17-year-old who is having a heightened amount of escalating temper. He's argumentative. He does not want to agree with authority figures. He evades accountability by placing blame on others. When an authority figure asks him to comply with a direct request, he's like, no, I'm not doing it. And then what the icing on the cake, y'all, is he was shoplifting and he was apprehended for that. So, would I say that this 17-year-old has a diagnosis of intermittent explosive disorder? Nope, this is not going to be the answer. So we are going to rule out A. What about conduct disorder? That's a good option. Let's hold on to it. What about C? Oppositional defiant disorder. Mm, that's also a good one. So let's hold on to C. What about D? Borderline personality disorder. Is that the symptoms that's being presented in this scenario? Nope, it is not. So I'm going to rule out D. The reason I want to rule out D is with borderline personality disorder, this really has a primary focus of unstable moods, behavior, and relationships. Where we see with this 17-year-old, it's a lot more than that, right? So we have either conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder. These two are similar in style. However, one is more extreme than the other. So the correct answer for this one is going to be B, conduct disorder. The reason that we want to say conduct disorder is typically with adolescents, it's a mental health condition in children where they are going to have a persistent pattern of aggressive or those antisocial behaviors. And it's going to include physical fighting, cruelty to animals. But what's really critical is that incident of shoplifting. All right, question 5. Which of the following skills are the most important for community social workers? So what's critical here is we need to know what type of social worker, right? So a community social worker, right? So the most important factor for a community social worker, is it going to be facilitation and participatory planning? Okay, let's hold on. That's a good one. B, communication and agenda setting. Okay. C, building consensus in research. D, facilitation in research. All right, y'all. So this is a straight recall question. And the answer to this one, facilitation and planning. So as a community social worker, really have that idea of completing like a needs assessment, right? When you do that needs assessment, you really need to identify and facilitate with those stakeholders, and then you need to start planning. That is going to be the most important role for a community social worker. Everything else is important. However, I cannot build my communication, I cannot conduct my research, I cannot build my consensus if I have not facilitated with my stakeholders and developed that plan to say, okay, this is what my target population is going to be. So A is going to be the correct answer. All right, question 6. A social worker is working with a family where one child has been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. The parents are struggling to understand the diagnosis. What is the best approach for the social worker? All right, so we are a social worker and we are working with a family. During this family session, we find out that one child has a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. Within your assessment with this family, the parents are like, hey, I'm struggling to understand. What is autism spectrum disorder? They're looking for you for guidance, right? Struggling to understand is critical. So if you know that these parents are struggling to understand what autism spectrum disorder is, what is going to be your best approach? Are you going to do A, provide them with an educational materials about autism? Okay, possibly. Let's hold on to it. B, refer them to a support group for parents of children with autism. No, that is not going to be our best answer. So we are going to rule out B. I'm not going to send my parents to a support group if they do not have a solid or sound understanding of what the actual diagnosis is. So C, schedule a family therapy session to discuss the diagnosis. Okay, let's hold on to it. D, assess the family's coping strategies and provide tailored support. Absolutely not. This does not even address the question that's being presented to us. So we're going to rule this out. So again, we're working with this family. One child has been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. The parents are like, I don't understand. What is this diagnosis? So the best approach that you can do for this family in this moment is provide them with that educational materials about autism. This is going to be where you are able to provide psychoeducation about autism rather than scheduling a new family therapy session to discuss the diagnosis, right? We need to provide this information directly to the parents first because they're struggling to understand, what does it mean that my child has ASD? All right, question 7. A social worker is conducting a needs assessment for a community health program. They find that many community members are unaware of available services. What should the social worker do next? All right, so in this one, this is a straight recall question, and we have to have knowledge of program development, right? So you're a social worker, and what you're doing is conducting a needs assessment, and you're doing this for the community health program. As a social worker is completing this needs assessment, what's critical is they find that many community members are unaware of available services. So they're like, oh, you didn't know we had these services available within the community? Okay. So, as a social worker working in the community, conducting a needs assessment, what is going to be the next thing that you do, what is going to be the best option, and what is going to be the first thing that you do? Because I know next means first and best. Those are interchangeable, okay? So, A, developing a marketing plan for the services. No, that's not going to be the best option here, right? Because the goal is that these community members are unaware of available services. So, what about B? Conduct focus groups to understand barriers to access. Okay, let's hold on to it. C. Create a list of services and distribute it widely. Okay, let's hold on. D. Partner with local organizations to raise awareness. Ooh, all right. So, because I know the steps that are included in the needs assessment, and that's what's critical here. That's why they put this in the scenario because they want you to focus on what are the proper channels of conducting a needs assessment. So, given that, B is going to be our correct answer. The next thing that we do, we've gathered this information. Now I need to conduct a focus group. I need to figure out what is it exactly are those barriers to where you were unaware of the available services in the community, right? Once you have a sound understanding of those barriers, now maybe yes, you can partner with those local organizations. Now you can create at least the services because you know what you are addressing. B is our correct answer. All right, 8. A social worker is conducting an assessment for a client who's been in a long-term abusive relationship. What should the social worker assess first? All right, so we are a social worker. We're completing an assessment for a client, but what's critical is this client has been in a long-term abusive relationship. This is critical. So, given that this client has been in a long-term abusive relationship, what are you going to assess first? What is priority in this situation? Is it going to be A, the client's emotional state? B, the client's safety and immediate needs? C, the history of the relationship? D, the client's support network? All right, y'all, the answer to this one is going to be B, the client's safety and immediate needs. This is a long-term abusive relationship. I need to know, when you go home, are you safe? Who is your support system? What do you need from me in this moment? That's what I am going to assess first. All right, question 9. A social worker is working with a client who has a history of eating disorders. The client expresses a desire to change their eating habits. What should the social worker assess first? Okay, so you're the social worker. Who is your client? This client has a history of eating disorders. Okay, let's highlight that. Now, during this session with your client, they say, hey, I have a desire to change my eating habits. So we know that this client has this desire. So as a social worker, what are you going to assess first? Is it going to be the client's motivation for change? The client's nutritional knowledge? The client's support system? The client's past treatment experiences? The correct answer to this one is going to be A. I need to know, how motivated are you really? I know you have this desire, but how motivated are you that you want to have this commitment to change your eating habits, right? Let's determine that motivational level, because that then will help guide the therapeutic process in establishing and creating those goals to ensure that that client meets them and they get to that place where they can change their eating habits. All right, last question, y'all. So question 10. A client is angry at their boss for not giving them a promotion. But instead of confronting the boss, they come home and yell at the partner. What defense mechanism is the client using? So this is a straight recall question. I have to know what is the definition of each of these presented terms down here. So let's go back into our scenario. I got a client, the client angry at the boss. But why? Because the boss did not give them a promotion. But instead of confronting the boss, what do? They come home and they yell at their partner. Ooh-wee. So you're angry at your boss because you didn't get the promotion, but you didn't say anything to the boss. They came home and they yelled at the partner. What defense mechanism is this client demonstrating? A, rationalization. B, displacement. C, projection. Or D, denial. All right, so this is kind of a tough one. But the correct answer is going to be B, displacement. And the reason it is displacement and not projection, because those can be confused sometimes, right? So displacement is when you're going to have those unwanted thoughts, feelings, or impulses redirected from the original source to a less threatening or more acceptable target. And that's exactly what occurred in this scenario. They were angry at their boss, but they did not confront the boss. Instead, they came home and displaced their emotions, their feelings onto their partner by yelling at them. All right, I hope y'all enjoyed these 10 questions. I hope you got all of them right. If not, that's okay, because this is a growing and learning opportunity. So just be proud of yourself that you even expose yourself to some content. And I will see y'all in my next video. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.